Yeah, messieurs! Welcome back to the Moff Spearfishing channel. As you could probably tell from that intro sequence, this video is going to be absolutely mental. Just like the last couple of videos, I was out with the Gemm crew, and on this first day we was only seeing potfish. We stayed hunting the potfish for a while, and from the surface we saw this giant kongver or green moray eel. Because the owner of the boat likes to eat them, we went down to take this monster. I took the first shot, and with these big morays you have to apply pressure right away. As soon as I got my line tight, Chucky popped it in the head again and the fight was on. I pulled as hard as I could to try and move it in its hole, and it ran out to try and attack anything it could get its mouth on. By doing that, it lost its grip on the reef, and I used that to my advantage to pull it out. Once it was out of its hole, it started spinning around and freaking out trying to rip itself free. However, with my shot placement being so good, I wasn't worried at all and I went straight to the surface.
You don't see that giant eat your body, man!
The thing about these giant kongs is that they're just the pure physical embodiment of violence. In my opinion, they're one of the most dangerous animals in the water, and I know multiple people who have been attacked by them. Because of that, when you're shooting them, you have to make sure to put them out as fast as possible because they're so dangerous. It also preserves the eating qualities, so it's a good practice to have regardless. We went on the boat to dispatch the eel, and after putting it down, I hopped back in the water to get some footage of it. This absolute monster is by far the biggest one I've ever shot. I didn't weigh it, but when I got on shore, I raised it up to my height and the tail was still touching the ground, putting this giant at close to 6 feet long. We continued diving after taking that giant kong and got some really nice potfish. After that, we were going to pack up and head home, but there was a spot that I really wanted to try before heading in. This is the big channel marker meant for oil tankers coming into cul-de-sac. I used to fish here with line a lot, but it was always too deep for me to dive there in the past, so I never really got the chance to check it out. Right away as I was heading down the chain, I noticed that there was a lot of life here. I could see a lot of small rainbow runners and a couple really big yellowtail snappers coming up from the bottom. I just continued heading down the chain, and when I looked into the deep, I saw this huge school of horse-eye jacks. With those fish being so far away, I wasn't expecting them to come any closer, and because the bottom was so deep, I stopped down the chain at 56 feet. I just stayed suspended where I was, not really expecting much to happen. However, when I looked back into the blue, I saw that massive school of horse-eye jacks swimming up to me, and I was not going to waste that opportunity. I just blasted the closest one to me since all the fish seemed to be the same size, and I just went straight up to the surface. In my opinion, that encounter with those jacks was one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. On Instagram, I've seen tons of videos of these vortexes of big horse-eye jacks, but I've never seen one in person. It was quite the spectacle, and with the fish that I picked out being 7 pounds, it's crazy to think that there were that many big fish in the same place.
A big touch there of it. Boy, at the bottom there is like 100 something feet together. There, defeated more.
With that solid fish in the cooler, I made a couple more drops but didn't say anything, so we ran home to get ready for diving the very next day. On this next day, we were going to make a send down to Canaries, and we ended up stopping at our offshore reef before getting to our destination. Right as I hopped in the water, I saw this really nice barra and started swimming down to it while doing squid fingers so I would be able to close the distance. The squid fingers seemed to be working, and as soon as I got in range, I pulled the trigger. As soon as my shot connected, that fish started ripping drag and went straight for the bottom. Fortunately, its initial run didn't last very long, so I was able to keep it off the bottom and just go straight up to the surface. It didn't make any more runs after that, so pulling it up to the surface was no problem at all, and I was able to get it into my hands relatively quickly. This solid barra came in at 6.5 pounds, which is a bit smaller than I originally thought just because of how fat that fish was. However, it was still a really nice fish and a great way to start off that day. We continued diving that zone for a while but didn't get any other fish, so we packed up and went to the zone that we were originally planning to dive. I made my first drop at this spot and headed straight to the bottom. Normally when I make a dive, I try to go straight to the bottom and stay as streamlined as possible so I can conserve energy on my way down. By doing that, I burn a lot less oxygen and it gives me a lot more bottom time for me to hunt more effectively. As I was approaching the bottom, I was doing a little looking around just to see if there was anything close by and to see which direction I would want to position myself in. I chose to land parallel with the sand line, and by using these tall stringy corals as cover, I was in the best possible position to hunt any target fish that would be swimming by. Since I was happy with where I was positioned, I just lay flat on the bottom while grunting to try and attract anything in the area. It's not like this area was overflowing with fish, but I still stayed on the bottom because you never know what will pass. I've said this before in previous videos, but my hunting style relies on the curiosity of fish. Throughout my life as a diver, I've been training my breath hold so I'll be able to stay on the bottom as long as possible. That way, if there's any fish in the area, there's a high chance that they'll come over to check me out. On this particular dive, I was on the bottom for quite a while and I finally saw something for me to shoot. This nice set of barjacks came cruising in and I lined up a shot on the biggest one. With the way it was swimming away from me, I just took a quick holding shot and went up to the surface. It was also kinda small, so it didn't give much of a fight as it was coming up. These smaller barjacks are really good eating, so when I'm not seeing anything else, I always make sure to take them. This one was about a pound, making it a perfect eating size fish to add onto my carrier. I continued diving that same area after shooting my barjack and saw a big piece of reef with a lot of grunts under it, so I got myself ready to make a drop. Just like the clip with the barjack, I went straight to the bottom, and on my drop I was looking around to see if there was anything else in the area. Since I didn't see anything, I continued swimming towards the reef to find a place for me to lie down. On my way down, I could tell that those grunts were acting a little skittish and running in and out of the holes, so when I hit the bottom I just made some noise to try and draw them out. Here you can see a couple really nice ones coming out right in front of me, but I didn't want to shoot into the rocks that were behind them. I had a lot of breath hold left as well, so I was just waiting to see if they would present a better shot. I also kept scanning the area for better opportunities, and when I turned around I saw a couple nice ones coming out of the reef behind me. I made sure not to react when I saw them, and I really took my time before turning to face them just so they wouldn't spook. After waiting a long time to make sure that those fish would be comfortable, I slowly turned my gun to face towards them. However, as soon as it got in their direction, they ran back underneath the hole. Right after that, another one came out of the hole but ran right back in as soon as it saw me, so I gave up on that set and watched back in front. That's when I saw this really nice pair of them hanging away from the reef. Again, I made sure not to react and they came right in and gave me a perfect shot. Even though I hit that fish with a spine shot, it still found a way to stick itself under the reef, so before I went back up to the surface, I tried to free it up. After pulling on it for a while, I tried dropping some reel line and it came right out, so I just went up to the surface with my fish. Once I made it to the surface, I pulled up this nice gowet or sailor's choice grunt, which are a very popular eating fish here in St. Lucia. This one came in at around 2 pounds, which is a pretty average size for them here, and with most of the fish that I saw being that size or bigger, I dealt with this one for me to go down and try and take some more. Unfortunately, at that point, they had all went and hide underneath the reef and I wasn't able to see them again. After that, I just continued shooting potfish for the rest of the day and we packed up early to go home for another trip later on in the week. A few days later, we were back out on the water and this first clip could only be described as some real madman things. We started out this day on the Atlantic coast, but I was really struggling to shoot any fish. Also, we had already been diving this zone for quite a while, so this was going to be my last drop here. As I was making my drop, I saw this huge white spotted filefish near the bottom, so I went down to go and take it. In my opinion, there's no fish quite as stupid as these ones, so it's always fun to harvest them. Rather than wasting a whole shot on them, I just used my spear to press them against the reef and then I grabbed them with my hands. I find these fish to be absolutely delicious, and in St. Lucia we call these, as well as all the other trigger and filefish, boos. After grabbing my first boost by hand, I stayed hanging around the bottom and saw this really nice queen triggerfish hanging in front of me. I was going to take a shot at it, but I didn't want to hit the reef that was behind it, so I just took my time and waited for it to present a better shot. I hit a perfect stone shot on that fish and went up to the surface with my 2-piece boost combo from KFB. Once I made it to the surface, I swam over to the boat, handed my gun to Gemm and hopped on board. I dropped the first fish in the boat and Gemm pulled up the second one for us to start heading out. We started heading back in the direction of home, but we wasn't done diving yet. On our way back, we decided to hit Pebbles, which is a very popular dive spot known for holding lots of big fish. I was one of the first to get in the water and it didn't take long for me to run into something big. As soon as I saw this huge Barra, I turned on my GoPro. I swam at that fish as hard as I could to close the distance and put in a solid shot. As soon as I hit it, the first thing on my mind was to keep it out of those rocks. I applied as much pressure as I could while heading up to the surface, and once I was up, I was able to relax a bit. I made sure to take my time while fighting this Barra because I knew it was a really nice fish. I let it fight and struggle to tire itself out, so by the time I got it close to me, it wouldn't have all its strength. Eventually, I started to feel it losing its energy and I knew it was time to pull it up. I brought it up slowly, and once it was close enough, I slid my hand down the spear and grabbed it by the gills. After getting it into my hands, I tried to brain and bleed the fish, but it wasn't done fighting yet. It made one last run to try and escape from in my hands and almost pulled me out of the water. Luckily, I was able to drive my knife all the way into its skull and it finally stopped fighting. After that, I just continued bleeding the fish and got it ready to go onto my carrier. This solid Barra came in at 15 pounds and it was a great feeling to finally have taken my first big fish of the day. That Barra had also made me come to a realization, so I kept diving around to try and test my theory. Before this trip, I only had a few days of diving experience at Pebbles, so I just treated it like any other spot. Whenever I'm testing out a new spot, I dive to the outermost edge of the reef and wait on the bottom to see if anything will pass. That's just how I shoot the majority of my fish, so I never even considered diving close to shore. With that being said, the fact that I got that Barra so close to shore had me rethinking my strategy, and I decided that I would try diving underneath the chimbler or whitewash. After hanging under there for a while, I saw this nice barjack come out and I lined up for a shot. This fish wasn't particularly big or impressive, but it was a very important catch for me. The fact that I got this fish on my first drop after trying my new strategy told me that I was doing the right thing. Once I hit the surface, I pulled that fish up as quickly as I could because I knew it was only a matter of time before I ran into something else. After taking this fish and putting it on my carrier, I continued diving down the coastline and ran into this huge bait ball of baby sardines. I made a dive and tried to go into this big divot in the reef, but I timed my drop wrong with the waves and it pushed me out. All I had to do though was wait for the waves to come back in and they would pull me into that divot. As soon as I got in, I realized how many sardines there were and this big jack crevalle came flying in from on top. I went to line up for a shot, but the timing of the waves didn't allow for it and I had to wait for them to settle down. Also, when I looked to my right, I saw this huge school of tarpon, which will be very important in a second. Again, I tried to line up a shot on one of those jacks, and at that point I just knew it wasn't going to happen. Also, because of the conditions I was diving in, I didn't want to stay in there for too long, so I started getting ready for the waves to push me out. Just like getting into the divot and lining up my shots, it was all about timing, and once I got it right, the waves just spat me out. As soon as it sent me out, I saw those big tarpon cruising towards me and I went for a stone shot on the biggest one. I missed the stone shot and applied pressure right away, but then this happened. That pop that you just heard was the sound of my line bursting. At this point I was just super surprised that it happened because I had full confidence in my gear. However, in hindsight, there's a lot I could have done to avoid that situation and to actually land one of those fish. I'd also like to explain why I shot that tarpon, because in a lot of places people don't harvest tarpon and don't like to eat them. First of all, the main thing I should have done differently to land one of those fish was to not shoot the one I did. I already had a shot on one that was turning out, so if I pulled the trigger on that fish, it probably would have just gone into open water and not cut my line on the reef. The only reason I switched targets last minute was because the one behind it was bigger and I thought I could stone it. But as you could see, I was greatly mistaken and I ended up killing that fish for no reason. That also brings me to why we even shoot tarpon in the first place. St. Lucia is a third world country along with many other Caribbean islands. Down here, we shoot all kinds of different fish as long as they're edible, and tarpon are no exception. I don't eat tarpon personally, but I understand that a lot of people do, so if I know that someone is going to eat this fish, I will take it for them. With that being said, I would never shoot anything that I know will go to waste, and I could never condone killing anything just for sport. Sorry about all the talking at the end, but that about wraps up this week's video. Even though I lost that fish and my spare, I still think that week was pretty sick. In my opinion, there were a lot of crazy moments in this video and I'm happy that I got to share them. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe because it lets me know that I'm doing something right. And if you saw anything that I could have done differently in this video, or if you have any suggestions for future videos, let me know in the comments because it will help me produce the best content that I possibly can. Also, stay tuned for next week's video because I pulled off some crazy catches. I was stuck using an undersized spare and diving in super dirty water, but I still managed to get my biggest ever mutton snapper. I even impressed myself with some of those clips, so it's definitely not something to miss out on. As always, thanks for watching and I hope to see you all next week. Later.